Have you ever felt like the spark that once lit up your days has quietly faded, leaving you wondering, what now? But here's a secret. They never tell you that spark isn't gone. It's just waiting to be reignited. In this journey, we'll uncover 12 of the best hobbies that don't just pass the time, they breathe life back into it. From hidden passions to joyful discoveries, each hobby holds a key to rediscovering you. Ready to find out what's first? Let's dive in. 1. Journaling, capturing your legacy in words. I never considered myself a writer. Growing up, I was always the talker, the storyteller at family gatherings, the one who kept everyone entertained with stories from my childhood. But writing? That felt like something for poets, novelists, people who knew how to craft perfect sentences. Then one evening, while sorting through old drawers, I found a letter my mother had written to me decades ago. Her words, scrawled in faded ink, held a depth of love and wisdom I had forgotten. It hit me. How many moments, thoughts, and lessons had I let slip away because I never wrote them down? So I started journaling, not for anyone else, just for me. At first, I felt silly staring at a blank page, but I started small. What made me smile today? What was a moment I never want to forget? Then memories surfaced. My first heartbreak, the time my best friend and I danced in the rain, the night I held my newborn in my arms. I realized that my life wasn't just a collection of years. It was a story worth telling. Journaling became my time machine, a way to preserve not just moments, but me. And let me tell you, there is something profoundly healing about seeing your own life reflected back in your own words. It reminds you of the battles you've fought, the love you've given, and the wisdom you carry. If you've ever thought, I don't know what to write about, start with one sentence. Maybe today's thoughts, a letter to your younger self, or even the funniest thing that's happened to you. Your story deserves to be remembered, and who better to write it than you? 2. Learning a new language, rewiring the brain with curiosity. I was 72 when I decided to learn Italian, not because I had grand plans to visit Rome, though wouldn't that be lovely, but because I overheard my neighbor, an elegant woman in her late 80s, effortlessly switching between Italian and English as she spoke to her granddaughter. I was in awe. Isn't it too late to start? I asked her one afternoon. She laughed. Too late for what? The time will pass anyway. You might as well fill it with something new. That night, I downloaded a language app. My first lesson was simple. Hello, goodbye, how are you? I practiced in the mirror, feeling both silly and strangely excited. The next week, I tried greeting my neighbor in Italian. She beamed, correcting my pronunciation with warmth, and from then on, it became our little game. Something magical happens when you challenge your brain in new ways. It wakes up. Suddenly, I was noticing new words in books, catching snippets of Italian in movies, feeling a spark of curiosity I hadn't felt in years. And here's what surprised me the most. It wasn't about becoming fluent. It was about learning, about proving to myself that my mind was still eager, still sharp, still hungry for discovery. If you've ever wanted to learn a language, start small. Pick a phrase, say it out loud, find a song in that language, and hum along. You don't need to be perfect, you just need to begin. And trust me, there's a thrill in realizing you can still surprise yourself. 3. Meditative Coloring, finding calm in every stroke. I used to think coloring books were for children. Then, one day, I walked into a craft store and found an entire section dedicated to adult coloring. The patterns were intricate, the colors mesmerizing, and before I knew it, I was holding a book filled with swirling mandalas and a box of colored pencils. That evening, I sat down at my kitchen table, skeptical but curious. I chose a soft blue and started filling in the first petal of a flower, then a shade of pink, then green, and something incredible happened. I stopped thinking about the grocery list, the news, the what ifs. For the first time in weeks, my mind was quiet. Coloring wasn't just an activity, it was a form of meditation. The gentle strokes of the pencil, the way the colors blended. It felt like a dance, one where I didn't have to lead, just follow. And the best part? There were no mistakes, no right or wrong, just colors, just moments of peace. I started making it a ritual. 10 minutes before bed, a cup of tea beside me, a soft lamp lighting up my workspace. Some nights, I colored bright and bold, letting my emotions spill onto the page. Other nights, soft pastels reflected my quiet mood. If you've ever struggled with an overactive mind, or just need a simple way to unwind, try this. Grab a coloring book, a set of pencils, and let yourself play. Let yourself create. Sometimes the simplest things bring the deepest peace. 4. Painting, turning emotions into art. I remember the day I picked up a paintbrush for the first time in decades. It wasn't in a fancy studio or at an art class. It was at my kitchen table, surrounded by newspaper scraps, a set of cheap watercolors, and an old cup of water I'd forgotten to change out. The canvas, just a piece of thick paper I found tucked in a drawer. You see, when I was younger, I loved art, but life has a way of sweeping you up, raising kids, careers, responsibilities. And somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that painting was something I used to do, that it belonged to my past. But one rainy afternoon, feeling restless and nostalgic, I decided to try again. I dipped the brush into the watery blue paint and made a single stroke. It was crooked, uneven, but it didn't matter, because with every stroke that followed, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't about creating a masterpiece. It was about the act of creating, the way the colors bled into each other, the gentle sound of the brush on paper, the simple joy of making something that hadn't existed before. Painting gave me space to feel without judgment. I could pour my emotions onto the canvas, frustration, joy, sadness, hope, and watch them transform into something beautiful, even if the lines weren't perfect. If you've ever thought, I'm not an artist, let me tell you, art isn't about perfection, it's about expression. Pick up a brush, use your fingers if you want, paint with colors that speak to you. You might be surprised at what your heart has been waiting to say. 5. Writing poetry, letting your soul speak. I never set out to be a poet. In fact, I stumbled into poetry quite by accident. It started with a simple habit, jotting down little phrases that popped into my mind. Lines overheard at the market, the way the sunlight hit the kitchen floor, fleeting emotions I couldn't quite explain. I didn't think of them as poems, just fragments of thought. But one evening, sitting by the window, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I found an old notebook filled with these scattered lines. I read them aloud, one after another, and realized they were poems. Not the kind you'd find in dusty old textbooks, but raw, honest reflections of my life. There was one in particular, scribbled on a coffee-stained page. I am stitched together by memories, threads of laughter woven with loss, soft seams of yesterday, holding the fabric of today. It wasn't perfect, the rhythm was off, the imagery simple, but it was mine, and that made it beautiful. Poetry isn't about fancy language or strict rules. It's about capturing a feeling, a fleeting thought before it disappears. It can be a single sentence or a page-long reflection. Some days, I write about love. Other days, about the way my cat stretches in the morning sun. If you've ever felt something so deeply but didn't know how to say it, try writing a poem. Don't worry about rhyme or structure. Just write. Let the words fall onto the page like raindrops. Messy, imperfect, and completely yours. 6 Photography, seeing life through a new lens. I got my first camera as a birthday gift when I turned 68. It wasn't anything fancy, just a small digital camera, simple enough for someone like me who thought ISO was some kind of secret code. But that little device changed the way I saw the world. At first, I took the usual photos, family gatherings, sunsets, my cat doing something adorable. But soon, I started noticing the small things, the way light filtered through tree leaves, the delicate veins in a flower petal, the reflection of clouds in a puddle after the rain. One morning, while walking through the park, I spotted an elderly couple sitting on a bench, holding hands in comfortable silence. I snapped a photo, trying to capture the warmth in that simple gesture. When I looked at the picture later, I realized it wasn't just a photo. It was a moment, frozen in time. Photography taught me to slow down, to really see the world instead of just passing through it. It's not about having the best camera or perfect technique. It's about finding beauty in the ordinary. I started carrying my camera everywhere, even on days I didn't plan to take photos. And you know what? Life became richer. I noticed more, appreciated more. Every click of the shutter felt like a little celebration of the world around me. If you've ever thought, I'm not good with technology, don't let that stop you. Use your phone, borrow a friend's camera, or get an old-fashioned disposable one. Look for the small moments, the ones that usually slip by unnoticed. Because sometimes the simplest photo holds the most meaning. 7. Volunteering. Sharing wisdom, spreading kindness. I'll never forget the first day I walked into the community center to volunteer. It wasn't some grand, life-altering decision. Honestly, I was just feeling restless. My days stretched long and quiet after retirement, and I missed the sense of purpose that came with a busy life. I signed up to help with a reading program for children, simple enough, I thought, but I didn't expect how much those little faces would teach me. There was one boy, Malik, who barely spoke above a whisper. His eyes were filled with uncertainty, much like how I felt walking into that room for the first time. Week after week, we read together, stories about adventure, kindness, courage, and slowly his voice grew louder, more confident. Watching Malik's transformation felt like witnessing my own. It reminded me that no matter our age, we all crave connection, encouragement, and someone who believes in us. Volunteering isn't just about giving back, it's about feeling seen and needed. Whether it's mentoring, helping at a food bank, or even making calls to check on neighbors. Every small act plants seeds of hope, both for others and for ourselves. If you've ever felt like your days lack meaning, try lending your time, even if it's just an hour a week. The impact is bigger than you think. Not just for those you help, but for the part of you that lights up when you realize you still have so much to offer. 8. Joining a book club, finding friendship in pages. I used to think book clubs were just an excuse to drink tea and gossip about the latest bestseller. But that changed when my daughter gifted me a novel for my birthday, one I wouldn't have picked for myself. She said, "Mom, you should join a book club. It'll be fun." Reluctantly, I did. I still remember walking into that first meeting, clutching the book like a shield. A room full of strangers felt intimidating. But as we began discussing the story, something surprising happened. I wasn't focused on fitting in anymore. I was too busy laughing, debating, and discovering new perspectives. Over time, those strangers became friends. We shared more than just opinions on characters. We shared pieces of our lives. There was Linda, who always brought homemade cookies and stories about her garden, and Carol, whose dry wit made even the dullest book entertaining. The beauty of a book club isn't just the books, it's the community. It's about gathering with people who might be different from you, but finding common ground through stories. And trust me, you don't need to be an English major to join. Your thoughts, your feelings about the book, they matter because you matter. If you're craving connection, look for a local book club or start one with a few friends. You'll find that the conversations often go far beyond the pages. And sometimes, the best stories come from the people sitting right beside you. 9. Dancing, moving with joy, not perfection. I hadn't danced in years, not since my knees started reminding me that I wasn't 25 anymore. But one evening, while sorting through old records, I found an album from my youth. On a whim, I played it. The familiar beat filled the room, and before I knew it, I was tapping my foot, then swaying, then dancing. There was no audience, no choreography, just me, barefoot, in the living room, moving like nobody was watching. And it felt incredible. Dancing isn't about perfect steps or fancy moves. It's about how it makes you feel. It's freedom, joy, and sometimes even a little rebellion against the idea that aging should be quiet and still. I've since joined a local dance class, not because I want to perform, but because moving to music makes me feel alive. We have a group of women, all in their 60s, 70, and even 80s. We laugh more than we dance, to be honest. Sometimes we forget the steps, sometimes we invent our own, and that's okay. The point isn't to get it right, it's to let go and enjoy the rhythm of life. If you've ever thought, I'm too old to dance, let me challenge you. Turn on your favorite song today, just for a minute. Let your body move however it wants. No rules, no expectations, just the music and you. You might find that your soul has been waiting for this little dance all along. 10. Gardening, growing beauty, inside and out. I still remember the first time I planted something with my own 2 hands. It was a scraggly little tomato plant my neighbor had given me, sitting in a cracked pot on my balcony. I didn't expect much. I'd always thought of gardening as something other people did, the ones with sprawling yards and green thumbs. But there it was, a tiny green sprout staring back at me like it was daring me to believe in it. At first, I fussed over it too much, overwatering, shifting it around, talking to it like it was a grandchild who wasn't listening. But as the days passed, I realized that the plant didn't need perfection. It needed patience. It needed consistency. Water, sunlight, time. And then one morning, a little yellow flower appeared. I was ridiculously proud. I showed it off like it was a trophy. Eventually, that flower became a small, ripe tomato. I picked it, sliced it, and savored it like it was the finest thing I'd ever tasted. Not because it was perfect, but because I had grown it. Gardening taught me that growth doesn't always look impressive in the moment. Sometimes it's slow, quiet, even invisible. But under the surface, life is working its magic. And that's true for us, too. You don't need a big yard to start gardening. A few pots on a windowsill will do. Herbs, flowers, vegetables, whatever speaks to you. There's something deeply satisfying about nurturing life, watching it flourish, and realizing that in some way you're growing right along with it. 11. Genealogy, tracing your family's footsteps. It started with an old photo album. You know the kind. Faded black and white pictures, handwritten notes in the margins, names I'd heard in passing but never really knew. One afternoon, I decided to dig a little deeper. Who were these people smiling stiffly into the camera, wearing clothes from a time I'd only seen in movies? I began asking questions. calling cousins, flipping through dusty boxes, even searching online archives. What started as simple curiosity turned into a journey through time. I discovered my great-grandmother had been a midwife in a small village, delivering babies by lantern light. I found letters my grandfather had written during the war, filled with hope and longing. It was like assembling a puzzle, each piece revealing not just facts, but stories. Love, struggle, resilience. And somewhere in that tangled web of names and dates, I found myself. Their choices, their dreams, their courage, it all flowed into me, shaping who I am. Genealogy isn't just about the past, it's about connection. It's realizing you're part of something bigger than your own story. It's understanding that your laugh, your stubborn streak, even your favorite recipes might be echoes of generations before you. If you've ever wondered about your roots, start small. Talk to family, jot down what you know, explore online resources. Each discovery is a thread, weaving your life into a tapestry that stretches back through time. And trust me, finding where you come from has a beautiful way of reminding you just how far you've come. 12. Traveling even locally. The word awaits. I used to think traveling meant boarding planes, packing suitcases, chasing sunsets in far-off places. But one day, I realized I'd lived in the same town for over 30 years and hadn't explored half of it. So, I decided to become a tourist in my own backyard. I started with small adventures, visiting a museum I'd always passed by but never entered, trying a new cafe tucked away on a street I'd never walked. I even took a spontaneous train ride to the next town over just to see what was there. No itinerary, no rush, just curiosity. One of my favorite discoveries was a little botanical garden hidden behind the library. I'd driven past it countless times, never noticing. But walking through it, surrounded by blooms I couldn't name, I felt like I'd stumbled into another world. Travel isn't about distance, it's about perspective. It's about seeing the ordinary with new eyes. Whether it's a weekend road trip, a new walking trail, or even just taking a different route to the grocery store, every little adventure adds color to your life. If you've ever felt like your world has gotten smaller, start exploring the corners you've overlooked. You don't need a passport, just a sense of wonder, because sometimes the most extraordinary journeys are waiting right outside your door. See, life after 70 is just the beginning of new adventures. Whether you're picking up a paintbrush, dancing in your living room, or planting your first seed, your spark is alive and well. Share your favorite hobby in the comments, subscribe for more inspiration, and stay tuned. Your next adventure is right around the corner.